During the news break, I was looking over at the corporate media news feed, and boy, they are pushing the Syria situation. I think the decision was made to not go into Iran because we all know that the claims about weapons of mass destruction are crud. So it looks like they're playing the Libyan gambit now on Syria. They've sent in agent provocateurs who are kicking up a ruckus. The Syrian government is basically trying to stop the killing that is being carried out by the agent provocateurs. And the American media is saying, oh, the government is cracking down on their people. How anti-democracy. And before they should do that, let's go back and review those videotapes from the Occupy demonstrations where American kids are being shot in the head with tear gas canisters and rubber bullets and tasers and all the rest of that stuff. But CNN is trying to make a big deal about an activist they have located in Syria by the name of Danny. There's a good Syrian name for you right now. So this is, again, they're playing the same game all over they played in Libya. Oh, the poor Libyan people, we must go in and save them. And, of course, the Libyan people are now trying to kick out the puppet government the U.S. put in on them, and Libya is turning into civil war again, and Syria will be the same. And it's all about regime change, one after the other. And we know it's all a lie and a hoax, and the government knows we know. They're simply counting on us sitting still and going along with it, because after all, we can't upset poor little Israel. It was really behind all of this stuff here. I think the reason they're going to go into Syria is because Russia and China haven't drawn a line with regard to Syria that we're aware of. Russia and China both sent the message unequivocal. If you go into Iran, it is World War III for real. And so the U.S. said, all right, well, you can have Iran. We'll go to Syria for a little while. It's like when everybody wanted to go into a Cuba again after the Bay of Pigs, and Johnson said, Cuba's not a good idea. We'll get into a nuclear war with Russia over that one. I'll give you Vietnam. How is that okay? You can have fun in Vietnam. Go have fun in Vietnam. Now, Obama is now expressing his concern about the abuses of super PACs because he's looking forward to November and realizing that in all probability there are going to be a lot of super PACs formed against him. And so far, Obama is not getting the big bucks donations, either to himself directly or to his super PACs. And, it's kind of weird to see what's going on out there because in 2008, everyone was saying, yes, it's the energized voters who are going to put Obama over the top. And now, of course, that the energized voters are all energized for Ron Paul, the corporate media is, they don't count. In fact, I got to tell you, in all honesty, when we were watching this circus unfold in Nevada on Saturday, it was almost embarrassing to see the corporate media coming out there and talking about Ron Paul's supporters like, yeah, he's got a lot of supporters behind him. Like, that's not supposed to be the way the country works. You're supposed to put the guy who's got the supporters into office. And the corporate media is trying to act like the Ron Paul supporters are they're just jamming up this system that we've built, to shove dictators at you. And they're acting like the Ron Paul supporters, the fact that he's got so many of them, it's a big annoyance, and it's just getting in the way. Now, a couple of really bizarre things happened in Nevada. And even Ron Paul's own people are starting to stand up and say, there's something going on here. Even Fox News had to comment, with some of the weird stuff that was going on. First of all, most of Nevada's votes were counted, again, in secret, undisclosed locations or on electronic machines. And Mitt Romney was the overwhelming victor, even though Ron Paul had been ahead in all of the online polls, in all of the pre-election polls, and even in a lot of the exit polls, he was ahead. But the official results put Mitt Romney ahead, with one exception. There was a special caucus at the Adelson Educational Campus. It's Sheldon Adelson, the same guy's been backing Gingrich. And the reason this was done is there are a lot of observant Jews and Seventh-day Adventists in Nevada who could not vote until after the sun went down. So they set up this special little place where they could come and vote once the sun was down, and in order to get the votes in on time, they simply counted them right there in front of the TV camera. And Ron Paul had a landslide victory. In the one place they counted by hand in front of the TV camera, Ron Paul won by a huge margin. And Seventh-day Adventists and observant Jews are not groups where Ron Paul is known to have a huge amount of strength. That alone has to tell you something is going very, very weird. When Ron Paul wins the one hand-counted eyewitness count. And everybody else says, oh, yeah, Mitt Romney. Yeah, it really was Mitt Romney. Now, over in Clark County, halfway through, all of a sudden the count stopped. They got to about like 50% reporting, and all of a sudden it stopped and froze. And it turned out they had a lot more votes cast than they actually have voters in Clark County. And they even reported that on Fox News. And Fox News' attitude is, how do these mistakes keep happening? They're not mistakes! The country is being stolen right in front of our eyes, and you, Fox News, are helping them do it by acting, oh, it's a mistake. Anyway, Sheldon Adelson, who poured all these millions of dollars into Gingrich to try and sort of put him between Ron Paul and second place, is now realizing that Gingrich is not doing very well. Adelson is talking about switching to Romney. He's going to start pouring millions of dollars into Romney. And he doesn't care about Gingrich, and he doesn't care about Romney. Adelson is out there saying he supports Israel, and that means keeping Ron Paul out of office no matter how much the American people might want him in there. That's really what it comes down to. Who's going to be in charge of this country? The American people or a foreign government? That's really what it's come down to. And Adelson's pouring all kinds of money. By the way, he's apparently under investigation in China for trying to bribe the Chinese government here. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the last segment of our show today. We're talking with Scott in Washington about the massive vote fraud we're seeing. Every one of the primary elections and caucuses so far has been tainted, contaminated. Iowa, 8 precincts, they lost the ballots. They announced the wrong winner. They still don't want to go back and actually say, we were wrong. And you need to understand something. Voters News Service, which is a major player in all of this stuff, is owned by the TV networks and a couple of key newspapers, New York Times and the Washington Post. The corporate media will never, ever, ever, ever call into doubt the validity and accuracy of the elections because they're financially involved, and hey, that's their job, to sell you the next government. So they're never going to cast doubt. I mean, look at the extremes they go to every time they get caught with another embarrassing goof. Oh, it's just a mistake. The voters were obviously lying to the exit pollsters. All this kind of absurdity. So the reason Ron Paul is not making a big issue about this is he knows the media will never give him a fair hearing on this topic, and worse, he knows the media are desperate for anything that he says that they can use to try and demonize him in the eyes of the public. Oh, he's just being a sore loser. He's a conspiracy wacko. He thinks elections in this country are crooked. How un-American can you be? And so forth. And so, I mean, look, they went back to a newsletter 20 years ago that he didn't even write. And look how they pounded on him with that. And so that's the reason Ron Paul really cannot, at least within the context of the corporate media, address the issue of vote fraud, other than to say he's concerned about obvious discrepancies which are taking place, which even Fox News is having to deal with. When Clark County has more votes cast than there are voters by a huge wide margin, fraud is taking place. All Fox News can say, well, golly, it must be a mistake. No, it must be vote fraud. So that's that situation. But we have the alternative media. We have the blogs. We have Jeff Rense. We have whatreallyhappened.com. We have all of these. And we're pointing out where it is vote fraud and massive vote fraud. And people are coming here to find out that information. So really, in the long run, doesn't matter whether or not the corporate media get on board with telling the truth or not. They're basically, making themselves irrelevant with each passing week that they keep standing up there and scream about, we have honest elections and Syria are the bad guys. And that's kind of where we are. Ron Paul wants to maintain the high ground. He is at core, I think like me, he's a paleocon. And he wants to get the nation back to the republic that it originally was before all this neocon nonsense and all this, let's go off and conquer the rest of the world situation. And he doesn't want to destroy the core of what the United States is supposed to be. And so he's stayed away from those questions and those scandals that could threaten the legitimacy of the government as a whole, whether it's massive vote fraud or 9/11 or any of those big scandals that are out there. There are two kinds of secrets in politics. There are the secrets you can safely use to destroy your opponent, and then there are secrets that if you touch them, they could destroy everything, and everybody loses their paycheck. And, Ron Paul, he's a career politician. He's going to stay away from the things that could bring down the government as a whole. He's still trying to work within the system. Poor, naive fool that he may be, but I understand and respect why he's doing so, okay? Anything else, Scott?
I understand to a certain extent about what you're saying, but my answer to that would be is that you're kind of damned if you do, if you're damned if you don't. And quite frankly, he would be the perfect person to do that, only for if other fact is that whether he gets the nomination or not, He's not running for another term in office. So he wouldn't have anything to lose one way or the other.
Well, at the end of the race, that may be true, but he's still in the race, and he's still, so far, all of his other opponents have self-destructed, and we got a long way to go. Mitt Romney could still flame out. I mean, with all the stuff that's coming out about money in the Swiss bank accounts in Cayman Islands. And right now we're looking at Maine, and so far Ron Paul is winning every single poll and measure up in Maine. He might actually take Maine, and that will make him a real viable candidate. And this game is not over. And until the game is over, Ron Paul is going to, he's going to take the high road, and that's fine. We here in the alternative media, we're the people whose task it is to put the issue of vote fraud out there, and we're succeeding. That's why, the Fox News gets out there and he says, oh yeah, there were more votes than voters in Clark County. The only reason they're even reporting it is it's already all over the net. And Fox News is reporting it only so they can say, well, it must just be a simple mistake. No, it isn't a mistake. It's vote fraud. And Fox is trying to cover for it, and they are failing miserably. And that's our job out here. That's what the alternative media's function is here. If we didn't need to do this, we wouldn't be doing it. I'd be, my wife's music, I'd be her roadie, taking amplifiers around and helping her get her music out there. But I'm doing this because, Ron Paul's still trying to play by the rules within the system, and I understand that there needs to be some people outside the system whose function it is to redefine the limits of what the political discussion is going to be. After it's all over, Ron Paul can say whatever he wants, and he's always welcome on this show. Ron, hint, 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 hint. But right now, while he's in the campaign, I understand the rules he's trying to play by and needs to play by that are imposed on him not only by the political system but by the corporate media. And I understand why he's playing by those rules and why he's not crossing certain lines. And, yeah, that's what he's got to do to do what he needs to accomplish. Out here, I'm not running for office, and I'm not trying to get millions of dollars from Sheldon Adelson. And so I can say whatever the heck I think needs to be said right now. And you all understand that, or you wouldn't be here listening to me. So, and thank you for that, by the way. Thank you for still sitting through all this stuff. Anything else, Scott?
Yeah, the quick neocon point that I wanted to bring up that I've noticed that's being floated out there as far as targeting Ron Paul supporters and talking about, well, the problem that people have with them is that they say that if he's not the nominee, that they're saying that they're not going to get behind the Rhino or whoever it is that they want to put out there.
We're not. If Ron Paul's not the nominee, I'm not even going to bother voting. Because I'll vote for Obama before I vote for Mitt Romney, and I'm not going to vote for Mitt Romney. So that's basically where it is.
Well, that's the thing. If we weren't such a significant force out there to begin with, then why is it that they're so concerned about who it is that we're going to get behind, whether or not their Rhino gets put up there or not?
Well, that's because if and they're still making jokes about all those Ron Paul supporters, because if the Ron Paul supporters sit home and don't vote, then Obama's going to get his second term. And that's really what it comes down to. The GOP leadership is willing to give Obama a second term rather than to give the people the candidate they want. That is how tightly controlled they are by Israel and by Wall Street. And, they're going to hoist with their own petard on this one. I am not going to support any other candidate but Ron Paul this year. I made that mistake in 2008, and I've regretted it ever since. If Ron Paul is there, I will support him and I will vote for him. And if it's not Ron Paul, then this election's over as far as I'm concerned, and I'm going to go back to bashing on the global warming people. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about politics. We're talking about money. We're talking about the very obvious vote fraud that's going on, and whether or not we, the American people, are really on the hook for all this trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars that are being borrowed by the U.S. government. Now remember, when you hear the word bailout, nobody is just creating the money out of thin air and giving it to anybody. It's being created out of thin air and loaned. So all these bailout deals for Europe, it's just another loan. It's a refi, is basically what it is. We know you can't make your payments here. We'll lower your monthly payments, but you're in debt to us for a lot longer. Plus, you got to, we're going to take the Parthenon and we're going to move it over to Las Vegas and build a hotel in it or something like that. Somebody in the chat room was saying, how do we know that we owe the money the government says that we owe? Well, we don't. We're just supposed to take their word for it, which right now, in the wake of Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, the government's word isn't worth a whole heck of a lot of anything. especially with all the vote fraud that we see going on here, especially with the fact that when Congress started debating TARP, the first of these mammoth giveaways to the banks and the American people, 90% of them said, do not use our money to save Wall Street from their crimes, and Congress went ahead and did it anyway. They spent your tax dollars to prop up Wall Street so the members of Congress' own investment portfolios wouldn't suffer. Now, that's taxation without representation. And in that little farm schoolhouse I grew up in New Hampshire, taxation without representation, that's a darn good reason to fire the government. And we have done it once before.